Hello. My name is Rylena Devereaux. 3 months ago, I was on my way to my promotion party, finally, a moment that was mine. I never made it. A car hit me. I woke up in the emergency room. Broken. Alone. When I called my parents, they said, "We can't cancel our vacation because of you." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're coming." But what they didn't know was, that accident didn't break me. It woke me up. And now, they're the ones sitting in court. My name built their scheme. And now? My voice is what's going to end it. So tell me, how far would your family go? To keep your mouth shut? The city had that slick, wet glow it gets after hours of steady drizzle, every sidewalk reflecting taillights and street lamps like oil slicks. I was moving fast, heels clicking, breath fogging up in the cool Portland air, as I rushed toward the venue. The emerald green of my dress caught headlights as I turned the corner, the fabric hugging my ribs just right. I remember smiling to myself. This was the moment. This was supposed to be it. "They're finally going to see me," I whispered, almost like a prayer. The light turned green. I stepped off the curb. That's the last full image I remember before everything unraveled. The sound was what hit first, screeching tires, a horn blaring too late, followed by a thud I felt more than heard. My ribs buckled. My shoulder slammed against the hood. My cheek kissed cold, dirty asphalt. Then, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the world was white. White ceiling, white lights, white sheets pulled up over me. My throat was dry, raw. I tried to speak but only managed a rasp. That's when the nurse appeared, short, red curls, glasses slipping down her nose. "You're in the emergency room, sweetie," she said, voice soft but steady. "You were in an accident." I blinked, my head pounding like a drum. Every movement felt like swimming through cement. My arm was strapped. There was a brace around my neck. I stared at the 4 dripping into my vein, counting drops like heartbeats. My phone. I needed my phone. The nurse placed it gently into my hand when I asked, her eyes scanning my face for something. Pain? Panic? She couldn't have known what I was really about to feel. I didn't think. I just dialed. Dad always picked up. Always. Even if he didn't say much, his voice had weight to it, like granite, even when he was disapproving. But this time, it wasn't his voice. It was hers. "Hello? Mom. It's me. I'm at the hospital. I was hit by a car. There was a pause. A long, awful pause. "Oh," she said flatly. "Well, we're in Cabo. Can't cancel our vacation because of you." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My lips parted, but there was nothing. She continued, her tone unchanged. "Keep us updated, okay? Gotta go, your father's booking the yacht for tomorrow." And then, just like that, she hung up. "No, are you okay?" "No, which hospital?" "No, we'll come home." Just. Logistics. Like I'd been a scheduling conflict. Like my being alive or not was a minor inconvenience during their midwinter getaway. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream or cry. I just stared at the wall, the room suddenly colder than before. The beeping of the heart monitor got faster for a moment. Then, slower. A nurse came in to check vitals, adjusting something on the monitor. "You have any family coming?" she asked gently. I hesitated. My lips parted. Then I just shook my head. "All right," she said. "We'll keep an eye on you." She left the door open slightly behind her. I laid there, the plastic wristband digging into my skin. My ribs ached. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. I turned my head slowly toward the window. The city outside was still alive, lights blinking, cars moving, people laughing somewhere. And me? I was floating in white noise, lost in the sterile hum of a room where no one was coming for me. I closed my eyes. But instead of peace, I saw it, Talon's 12th birthday. A big blue cake, balloons everywhere, and Dad filming it all like a proud producer. My 12th birthday? A candle stuck in a muffin. Sorry, we'll do something next weekend, that never came. My gift had been delayed shipping, and somehow it never arrived. Always second. Always a footnote. Even now, hospitalized, broken, I was still just a blip in their itinerary. A nurse came back in, wrapped a warm blanket around me. "Let's keep you cozy, sweetheart," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. But I didn't cry. Instead, a silence settled over me, colder than anything the nurses could treat. It crept into my bones, coiled itself around my spine. And right then, I knew, something in me had shifted. The nurse adjusted the blanket and smiled, trying to offer some sliver of comfort. Then she held out a small plastic bag. "Someone dropped off your purse," she said. "No note. Just this." Inside, next to my ID and lipstick, was a black envelope. The envelope wasn't heavy, but somehow it had weight. That kind of weight you feel in your stomach before your mind even catches up. I unfolded the single slip of paper inside. It was a parking ticket. Issued in downtown Portland. Timestamped 3 hours after I was hit by a car. The car listed? My father's. So much for Cabo. I let the paper fall to my lap, the truth settling in like a lead blanket. They weren't out of the country. They were here, somewhere in the same city, when I was fighting to stay conscious in an emergency room. They lied. And it wasn't just neglect anymore. It was effort. Intentional. Calculated. Over the next few days, I stayed in that hospital bed, too bruised to move fast and too stunned to try. I answered the nurses with polite nods, responded to the doctors with forced clarity. But inside, something had gone quiet. Something I didn't think I'd get back. One morning, a bouquet arrived. White lilies. A generic card from Human Resources at work. "Wishing you a swift recovery, Rylena. Let us know how we can help." Next came an edible arrangement. Then a coworker forwarded a video. Subject line, "Sorry you missed your party." I shouldn't have clicked. But I did. It was my promotion party, streamed live on someone's Instagram story. There were streamers, drinks, laughter echoing through the phone speaker. I watched as my department lead raised a glass. "To Rylena," she said, smiling, "wherever she is." Polite laughter. Someone in the background added, "Maybe she bailed for a better offer." The room erupted. They moved on fast. No moment of silence. No mention that I had nearly died. Just cake and cocktails. I set the phone down and turned my face away from the window. The flowers on my table looked a little less bright. The next morning, the doctor signed my discharge papers. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. I just called a cab and rode home. It was raining again, not hard, just the kind of drizzle that soaked you through without making a sound. The cab stopped outside the house I'd grown up in. It looked the same, white siding, shutters that needed repainting, the overgrown hydrangeas out front. I paid the driver and stepped out, clutching the hospital's duffel bag they'd let me take. I knocked. The lights were on. Someone was home. I waited, shifting from foot to foot, the damp starting to sneak into my socks. I knocked again, harder this time. Eventually, the door creaked open. My mother stood there in yoga pants and a wine-colored pullover. Her hair was tied back. No makeup. She looked comfortable. Like someone in the middle of a cozy evening, not a mother seeing her daughter return from the hospital. "You should have called," she said, her eyes flicking to the bag in my hand. "We're leaving again tomorrow." That was it. No hug. No, "How are you feeling?" Just travel logistics. She stepped aside, letting me in without ceremony. The house smelled like lemon polish and leftover takeout. My father wasn't in sight. Neither was Talon. I walked through the entryway like a guest. My bag hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud. My mother was already halfway to the kitchen. "You hungry?" "No," I answered, the word catching in my throat. "Suit yourself." The guest room wasn't available, something about the window being stuck. My old bedroom had become a storage space. Yoga mats, holiday bins, a treadmill no one used. She set up a cot in the den. No blankets. Just a sheet and a thin pillow. "We'll keep it quiet," she added. "Talon's got a Zoom conference in the morning." I nodded. Said nothing. That night, I wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. No one else was awake. The fridge buzzed softly. On the counter sat a leather-bound planner. My mother's. I shouldn't have looked. But my hands moved on their own. I flipped to the date of my promotion party. Talon, presentation at 7 p.m. That was it. No mention of me. No scribbled reminder. No note that her daughter was supposed to be celebrated that night. I checked the next few days. Dentist appointments. A brunch. Nothing about the hospital. Nothing about me. I set the planner down and went back to the cot. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Not crying. Just empty. And then a question surfaced, uninvited. What would happen if I just disappeared? The screen glowed back at me in that cold, clinical blue every banking site seems to use. I'd typed in my social security number, birth date, email, all information I'd never, ever used to open this particular account. And yet, the system welcomed me like an old friend. Balance, $43.18. Account holder, Rylena Devereaux. Account opened, September 3, 2006. I was 16. The name on the account was mine. But none of the transactions looked familiar. Transfers labeled Education Reserve and Family Holdings dated back more than a decade, with amounts I never touched, $3, $201 month, $7,500 another. In between were withdrawals to names I didn't recognize, addresses I didn't live at, and payment memos like Fund Q2 Allocation and Investor Advance. I scrolled through pages of this nonsense, my stomach tightening with every line. And then I saw it. The signature. It was mine, or at least, it was supposed to be. But the swoop of the R, the loop and the L. They were wrong. Off. Like someone had tried to mimic my name from memory. I leaned back in the chair, blinking at the screen. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the humming of the fridge and the faint tick of the clock above the stove. My breath felt shallow. Controlled. Almost like I was watching someone else live this moment from across the room. My phone buzzed beside me. A name I hadn't seen in years. Drew. We hadn't talked since grad school. Last I heard, he was working for some boutique finance compliance firm in D.C. We'd ended things quietly. No drama. Just different cities, different lives. But now his name was lighting up my screen like a bad omen. I answered. Hey, he said, cautious. Weird question. Did you co-sign something for your dad? I felt my whole body stiffen. What? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, he went on, his voice getting firmer, but your name popped up on a flagged loan at my firm, $75,000. Signed a little over a year ago. It's connected to an investment pool that's shaky. The signature looks like yours. So does the email. Your work email. I sat down hard, back hitting the wooden chair like I'd been pushed. I never signed anything, I whispered. You sure? He asked. Because this isn't some back alley loan shark. It's under a federal program. If the funds get misused, it becomes, well, legally sticky. I didn't sign anything, Drew, I said again, firmer this time. I would remember. There was a pause. Okay, he finally said. Then you should probably look into who did. Because this is not small. And if your name's been used, you need to get ahead of it, fast. I thanked him and hung up. The next few hours blurred. I dug through old files, cross-checked every loan or form I could think of. But the trail always led back to that same account, the one I didn't open. My name. My ID. My job title being used without my consent. At dinner, I sat across from my mother, hands shaking around my glass of water. I placed the printed bank statements on the table. She looked at them for less than 2 seconds before reaching for the coffee pot. I thought your father told you, she said, not meeting my eyes. It's a family financial vehicle. We all benefit. That's my name, I said. My signature. My email address. You've always said we're one family, right? She replied, like this was some lesson in unity I was failing. I stared at her, mouth dry. You forged legal documents. She finally looked up. Don't be dramatic, Rylena. We needed a clean name. You're the stable one. The logical choice. I blinked. The stable one? Before she could answer, Talon strolled in, towel slung around his neck, still damp from a shower. He looked at the papers on the table and grinned. Morning, CFO, he said with a wink. I didn't respond. I just watched him pour himself a bowl of cereal like we weren't standing in the middle of a crime scene. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the cot in the den, staring up at the shadowy outline of the ceiling fan. My pulse thudded in my ears. I kept thinking about that signature. About Drew's voice. About my mother's calm dismissal, as if she hadn't just admitted to fraud over a casual dinner. Around 2 a.m, I opened my laptop again. I typed into the search bar, financial fraud using family member's name. The first result read, maximum sentence, 20 years in prison. I didn't close the tab. I didn't cry either. Instead, I started a spreadsheet. Names. Dates. transaction amounts, signatures. I listed everything I remembered my family borrowing in my name, that student loan they said they'd handle, that business checking account Dad asked me to sign because his ID had expired, that one time Mom needed just a quick signature to update an address on an insurance form. Piece by piece, it all came back. And as the list grew, so did something else, clarity. I wasn't part of a family. I was part of a scheme. After hours staring at bank statements, contracts I didn't remember signing, and transaction logs that seemed pulled from someone else's life, I sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. It was still early, maybe 8:30 in the morning. I hadn't slept much. Instead, I spent the night collecting every scrap of data I could find. Something about seeing it all lined up, my name, my job title, my email, my so-called role, made something inside me go still. It wasn't shock anymore. It was something quieter, sharper, like glass pressed against the inside of my ribs. I typed Veritas Family Capital into Google. The name had been floating around in some of the transactions I'd flagged. It sounded fancy, vague enough to feel legitimate, but nowhere near as real as it claimed to be. The first hit was an old seminar listing from a hotel conference in Salem. A financial literacy event targeting mid-level investors. Building wealth through family trust models. I clicked. There were slides. Dozens of them. Most were boilerplate, graphs, mission statements, quotes about legacy and vision. And then, on slide 3, I saw myself. It wasn't a photo I remembered taking, but it was me. My professional headshot from LinkedIn, cropped just close enough to feel intentional. Underneath it, Rylena Devereaux, cybersecurity advisor, partner. Partner? There was a fake quote next to it, too. Something about ensuring client data safety as part of our ethical financial standards. The words sounded like they'd been written by someone who'd only skimmed a corporate handbook. My job title. My face. My reputation. Used like stock art in a brochure peddling smoke and mirrors. It was real now. Not just forged documents or hushed denials over coffee. They'd built a story around me. They had cast me in a role I never auditioned for. The responsible daughter, the one with credentials and credibility. And worst of all, it worked. I shut the laptop slowly, like if I moved too fast it might all explode. My palms were damp. My mouth dry. I went to the sink, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there staring out the kitchen window like I was waiting for something to shift. The day stretched on, quiet in all the wrong ways. Talon was out, probably at the gym, or wherever it was he networked these days. My father was unreachable, his phone going straight to voicemail. My mother moved through the house like nothing was off. Around lunchtime, I passed by the dining table and noticed a small envelope in the trash. Just barely peeking out from under a used paper towel. I pulled it out, more from instinct than anything. It was a thank you card. Thanks for the spa weekend. Best gift ever, Bonnie and Chuck. I stared at the names for a moment, confused. Bonnie and Chuck were their neighbors. Retired. The kind who hosted loud barbecues and always overwatered their lawn. I flipped the card open. Inside was the voucher I'd gifted my parents after I got promoted. A high-end weekend spa retreat. My way of saying thank you, even after everything. The voucher was intact. Never used. My mother had simply given it away. We figured they'd enjoy it more, she said when I confronted her, her voice so casual it could have been about leftover lasagna. We're not spa people. She said it like it was a practical matter. Like it had nothing to do with the gesture behind it. I turned the card around. The note inside had been signed, Love, Rylena. In my handwriting. Except, it wasn't mine. Her imitation was close, but not close enough. Later that evening, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to piece together what this was. A scam? A family-run Ponzi scheme? A misguided attempt at helping each other? No one else seemed the least bit disturbed. I thought about the times I'd stayed up late helping Talon with his resume, formatting every bullet point like it mattered. I remembered giving my father feedback on his website's security features. Fixing broken links. Rewriting copy. I'd given. Quietly. Constantly. And when I'd needed help, just once, after getting hit by a car and being left alone in a hospital bed, they'd all disappeared. It wasn't about love anymore. Or fairness. Or loyalty. It was about usefulness. To them, I was a resource. Something to be mined, then ignored. I whispered aloud, half to myself, half to the walls, this isn't family. This is a facade. My mother walked by just then, holding a basket of clean laundry. She didn't stop. Didn't look. Just said, "Oh honey, can you move? I need the table." I didn't reply. I just stood, folded the laptop, and took it back to the cot in the den. At 9:42 p.m., I opened a new email. Subject, potential identity misuse. Body. Hi. I believe my name and credentials may have been used without my consent in a financial scheme connected to individuals I am related to. I've attached initial documentation and screenshots. Would appreciate a confidential conversation with legal. Thank you. Rylena Devereaux. I hit send. And then I waited. The phone call came at 8:12 a.m. sharp. I was still in the oversized t-shirt I'd slept in, hair tied up in a lazy knot, the half-drunk cup of tea from last night still sitting cold on the nightstand. When I answered, I expected some vague HR follow-up. Instead, I got a woman with a crisp voice and zero small talk. This is Lorraine Marshall from Corporate Legal. We received your email regarding potential misuse of your professional identity. I want to assure you, Rylena, we take this very seriously. I sat up straighter, heart thudding. Thank you, I said quietly. You did the right thing by reaching out, she added. We've already looped in federal compliance. Someone from financial crimes will contact you directly. We're here to support you. Support. A word I hadn't heard in weeks in any meaningful way. It felt unfamiliar. Suspicious, almost. Like trying on a coat that used to fit but now pulls weird at the shoulders. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window at nothing. The backyard looked the same, overgrown hedges, the fence we never fixed, Dad's rusting grill. The only thing different was me. Talon's voice cut through the silence like a bad radio jingle. He was already in the kitchen when I walked in, leaned against the counter with a mug of something far too expensive for someone who hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. You know what the problem is with this generation, he started, not even looking at me. Everyone's so damn sensitive. Nobody can take a joke or a little pressure without crying about trauma. I said nothing. I poured myself some coffee. The creamer was almost empty. Typical. You know what I heard last night, he continued, raising an eyebrow like he was auditioning for a commercial. Some company out in California dropped a client because she tweeted something 10 years ago. 10 years. People have no sense of loyalty anymore. He turned, finally locking eyes with me. There it was, that practiced smugness. Some of us work to keep this family stable, he said, gesturing vaguely. Others just float along. But I guess that's your brand, right? Needy. I set my mug down gently. Too gently. It made no sound on the granite. I looked at him for a long time. Not responding. Not flinching. Just studying the curve of his lip when he smirked and the emptiness in his eyes when he said things like that. He waited for a comeback. I gave him silence. By noon, I was in the downtown office of a friend from law school, Eden. We hadn't been close, but we'd kept in touch over the years through holiday cards and LinkedIn congratulations. She greeted me in the lobby with a quick hug and a raised brow. You look like hell, she said, not unkindly. I handed her a thumb drive and a folder. You're gonna love this. An hour later, Eden sat back in her chair, arms folded. Well, she said slowly, you're not just a victim here. You're the entire umbrella. You're the linchpin they built everything around. I didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. I'll draw up paperwork, she continued. We'll document everything. But Rylena, this isn't just an oopsie-daisy level mistake. If this goes to court, people could serve time. Real time. I'm not trying to burn the house down, I said. I'm just trying to stop pretending it's still standing. I signed the confidentiality release with steady hands. Later that evening, just after dinner, my father summoned me to his office. That's how he phrased it. Tell her to come in here. He was seated behind his desk, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. It was his serious look. The same one he wore during every family meeting he led like a CEO. The same look he gave me when I said I wanted to study computer science instead of business. You think you're helping anyone by blowing this up, he started, voice low. I stayed silent. Let him talk. You want headlines? A lawsuit? Your name dragged through depositions and hearings and press? He leaned back, fingers steepled. You really think the court's going to look at this and believe you had no idea? I finally spoke. I didn't ask for any of this. You put me there. He scoffed. Don't play innocent. You benefited. You got the job, the credibility. You rode the wave. I earned my job, I shot back. And you used it. Without asking. He stood slowly. Let me explain something to you, because clearly you forgot how this works. Family protects family. That's what we do. I met his gaze. No. What we do is protect appearances. No matter who gets hurt. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might yell. Instead, he walked around the desk and got closer than he needed to. If you say one word, he said, voice dropping into a near whisper, we all go down. That includes you. I didn't blink. Then let's see who the courts believe. I walked out without waiting for a response. That night, sitting cross-legged on the cot, I opened my laptop and typed out one more email. This one wasn't to Eden. It was to the contact Lorraine from corporate had passed along. Subject, formal report, financial misuse and identity fraud. To Federal Financial Crimes Division. I attached the files, clicked send, and closed the laptop. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreaming. By mid-morning, I had almost convinced myself that the worst had passed. Sunlight was pushing through the overcast sky, casting thin streaks of gold onto the kitchen tiles. The house was quiet, eerily so. Not peaceful. Just expectant, like something was holding its breath. I brewed a cup of coffee, clicked open my laptop, and tried to pretend I might be able to focus on work. Maybe even get through a few emails, sort some documents, stabilize something. Anything. That illusion lasted 4.5 minutes. My phone rang. I saw the caller ID and already knew the tone before I picked up. My manager's name blinked on the screen, and when I answered, her voice came through tight and measured, professional concern wrapped in bubble wrap. Hey, she said. This might be nothing, but HR got an email this morning. Flagged it right away. I paused. What kind of email? Anonymous, she said. Claimed you'd been hospitalized for mental health reasons. That we should be careful about you having access to sensitive systems, especially anything security related. It was signed a concerned family member. My blood went cold. They didn't use a real name? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. No, she said. Just a Gmail address. But, Rylena, it's textbook sabotage. Still, HR has to check boxes. They're scheduling a short review call. I thanked her. Said I understood. Hung up. Then I stood in the kitchen, holding my phone like it might detonate in my hand. I didn't need to speculate. The language, the angle, the smear campaign disguised as concern, it had Talon's fingerprints all over it. The execution, though? That reeked of Virgil. The strategy of preemptive discrediting, the careful salting of the earth before the trial had even bloomed. They were trying to make me radioactive. If I looked unstable, my testimony would look bitter. If I looked erratic, then everything I'd brought forward would seem like vengeance and drag. They didn't know I'd already gone to the FBI. Or maybe they did. Maybe this was their counterattack. I didn't have time to spiral. Not now. I had documentation to compile, a legal review call at 3 p.m., and a fragile grip on credibility I needed to keep intact. I went back to the kitchen table. Began sorting through encrypted folders, creating a timeline for legal. My coffee had gone cold. The morning passed in a blur of file names and forwarded PDFs. Then, at noon, a soft knock. Not the doorbell. Just 3 light taps. I opened the door to find my mother standing there with a bowl of soup in her hands, steam curling from the surface like a prop from a play. I thought you could use something warm, she said gently. You haven't been eating. She didn't ask to come in. She just stepped forward, and I, tired, distracted, numb, stepped aside. She placed the bowl on the table and sat across from me like it was any normal Wednesday. You used to be so calm, she said, not looking up. So steady. Now it's like you're always bracing for something. I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't break the illusion she was trying to reassemble. I know things have been tense, she continued, offering me the same soft smile she once gave to dinner guests and unsuspecting therapists. But we're family. We've always taken care of each other. The audacity of that sentence nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Somewhere inside, a part of me still needed, to believe her. To believe that this woman, who had once kissed my forehead after nightmares and braided my hair for first-grade picture day, could mean it. But layered beneath the softness was the same coldness that had let her leave me alone in a hospital bed. The same practiced denial that allowed her to smile while erasing me. "I appreciate the soup," I said quietly, voice as even as I could make it. She patted my hand like a stranger in a waiting room, then stood, collected her purse, and left without another word. I didn't touch the food. That night, I lay in bed replaying the conversation. Over and over. There was something off. Too polished. Too intentional. It had the rhythm of a speech, not a visit. My gut kept circling the edges of a thought I hadn't dared name. Then it landed. She was too nice. Too rehearsed. I threw off the blanket and got out of bed. Opened my laptop. Something about the corporate legal thread felt incomplete. I scrolled. One of my most recent replies to the legal department, confirming the timeline of data access, was gone. Not archived. Gone. I checked the trash. There it was. Deleted roughly 2 hours after her visit. My stomach bottomed out. She'd gone into my laptop. While I was showering. Or maybe resting. Opened my email. Deleted a message critical to the investigation. Then had the audacity to sit across from me with homemade soup and talk about trust. My heart pounded as I reached for my phone and opened the hallway camera app, a cheap motion-sensitive device I'd installed near the entry for peace of mind. I scrolled back through the day's footage. There she was. 12:37 p.m., entering my room. 12:40, opening my laptop. 12:46, leaving like nothing had happened. I took screenshots. Downloaded the clip. Cross-checked the timestamp with the deleted email. Matched. Then I compiled everything, video stills, log timestamps, screenshots of the trash folder, and attached them to a new email. Subject, escalation of internal interference, additional evidence attached. The body of the email was short. In case you were wondering whether I was imagining the pressure. I hit send. Again. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had packed 2 suitcases, my laptop bag, and a leather document folder I now carried like armor. I booked a furnished extended stay downtown, nothing special, but it had locks I trusted and a front desk clerk who didn't make small talk. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. On the cab ride over, I stared out the window as the neighborhood passed like a slideshow I didn't want to remember. The street where I learned to ride a bike. The tree I used to climb. The corner mailbox where I once left a letter to Santa. None of it felt mine anymore. As we pulled into the hotel's drive, I took out my phone. Opened the family group chat. I didn't argue. I didn't announce. I didn't leave it. I deleted it. Just like that. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like oxygen return to my lungs. It was almost noon when I finished rearranging the folders on my desktop, each one a breadcrumb trail of the past year. One was labeled testimony, another financial trail, and a third simply said truth, pending. The soft hum of the hotel HVAC unit underscored the silence like a white noise confession I hadn't asked for. Somewhere in the hallway, a housekeeping cart rolled past. A door clicked shut in the distance. Then my phone buzzed. It sat on the kitchen counter, screen aglow with a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. The kind of label that makes your gut clench before your brain catches up. I let it ring once. Twice. I was about to let it go to voicemail, was halfway through deciding not to care, when something in my stomach shifted. A tug. A whisper. A nudge. I reached for it and swiped. Hello? There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, flat and clipped, like she'd rehearsed this call in her car mirror or in the shower, or maybe not at all. Maybe the words had just built up until they could no longer be contained. Are you Rylena Devereaux? My throat tightened. Yes. Her reply came like a hammer disguised as a whisper. You cost me $60,000. Silence detonated in my ear. I saw your face in that presentation, she said. Smiling. They called you the cybersecurity advisor. You even had a quote on the homepage. I trusted that. I opened my mouth, but nothing emerged. Not even breath. My husband and I were supposed to retire early. We sold our second property, our lake house, the place where our grandchildren learned to swim. We bought into what your family was selling. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. That made it worse. And now, she continued. It's gone. Everything. You were the reason I signed the paperwork. No accusation screamed. No curse words hurled. Just a clean, brutal indictment. Then, nothing. She hung up. No name. No goodbye. Just an end. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the call screen already black. I stayed frozen like that for a full minute, maybe longer. Then my arm fell slowly to my side, weighted down by something far heavier than a device. That was the moment everything shifted. Not the bank records. Not the anonymous threats. Not even the footage of my mother sitting at my desk deleting emails like they were expired coupons. No. It was this. That woman's voice. The quiet devastation in it. I sat on the edge of the bed, legs folding beneath me without thought, like my body knew it couldn't stand against this. And I cried. Not for me. Not this time. It wasn't grief. It was shame. A kind that lives in your ribs, that presses against your lungs when you realize you were part of something you never consented to but still helped build, if only by standing too close. I hadn't lied. I hadn't moved money or altered spreadsheets or spoken false promises. But I was the face they used. The borrowed legitimacy. The daughter with the clean record and the credible job. My image had been enough to make people sign. I thought I had been careful. I thought not knowing protected me from guilt. I was wrong. An hour later, my email pinged. Subject line, request for interview confirmation. The sender was a Department of Justice domain. The message was simple, Agent Mason requesting a formal video interview later that afternoon. I clicked reply. Yes. At 4 p.m. sharp, the screen flickered on, and there he was, Agent Mason. Late 40s. Business casual in the federal sense, clean blazer, plain shirt, no tie. A face that looked like it had heard every kind of excuse, seen every kind of lie. His voice was measured. Not unfriendly, not warm. Just precise. Ms. Devereaux, he began, you're not under investigation. That's important to establish right away. You're not the target here. I nodded, saying nothing. But, he continued, you've become a central figure in a fraud case we've been quietly developing for over 8 months now. He tapped a key, and the shared screen blinked to life, filling with a flowchart that looked like a conspiracy theorist's wall had been digitized. Dozens of names. Shell companies. Transfers. Cross-referenced emails. At the center, me. My face. My job title. My professional headshot from LinkedIn. Pulled without permission and placed into the heart of a lie. They built the story around you, he said. Your credentials, your clean record. You gave the operation a sense of trust. Without your image, the whole thing doesn't hold. I stared at it. At the symmetry. At the cruelty of it. I didn't know, I said, barely audible. I believe you, he replied. And we've already interviewed multiple witnesses to support that. Your digital records match your story. But here's where we need your help. I straightened. We need your cooperation, he said. Full consent to subpoena every document you've submitted, every internal message, every cloud file associated with your family's companies. And if I give that? We also need a formal statement. In writing. Ideally, on record. Not just what you knew, but how the public was misled. I hesitated. Will it destroy them? He didn't blink. They destroyed themselves. You'd just be turning the lights on. I closed my eyes. Then opened them again. Okay. You can have everything. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders softened. You're sure? I'm sure, I said. I've been sure since the phone call this morning. He tilted his head. Someone called you? I nodded. An investor. No name. Just hurt. He leaned back. You've got courage, Ms. Devereaux. Most people just walk away. I tried, I said. But apparently, walking away was never really an option. We ended the call. The screen froze on the last image of the flowchart, my name tangled in a web I never chose but was now responsible for helping untangle. I didn't move for a long time. Then I stood. Pulled the curtains closed. Turned on the desk lamp. The glow of it cast a warm halo across the carpet like a circle drawn in a war room. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it, Testimony, Phase 1. Inside, I opened a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment. Then I typed the title. Everything They Never Asked Me. And for the first time in months, the words didn't hesitate. They poured. Because finally, they were mine. It was cold inside the courthouse, not the kind of chill you blame on overactive air conditioning or October wind slipping through a cracked window. This was the kind of cold that lives in bone and memory, the kind you feel when something irreversible is about to take place. I felt it the moment I stepped through the metal detector, the beep echoing like a bell marking the start of something final. Outside, reporters had already staked their ground. Laminated press badges hung from lanyards like battle flags. They clutched coffee cups and adjusted camera tripods, murmuring among themselves as if proximity might turn them into insiders. One of them thrust a mic toward me the second the doors opened. "Rylena." The question was cut off by a guard stepping between us. I didn't stop walking. I didn't flinch. My silence had become my protest. My refusal to play the role they'd written for me, the compliant daughter, the silent casualty of someone else's ambition. They could ask. I would not answer. The courtroom was already full when I entered. Every seat taken. Some faces familiar, others not. There were whispers. Always whispers. But they quieted as I moved down the aisle and took my seat behind the prosecution table. I wore navy. Not black, too funereal. Not red, too provocative. Navy. Clean lines, no frills. It said, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to conclude what should have never begun." My name was everywhere. On the monitors. In the case title. On the placards sitting in front of the lawyers. I was no longer a shadow in my family's narrative. I had become the footnote they never wanted written. Agent Mason began the presentation like a teacher giving a lecture on cause and consequence. He stood beside the projector with the slow patience of someone who had done the work, who had waited for this truth to come into the light. Slide after slide, transaction logs, asset transfers, offshore accounts, email headers, login timestamps. It wasn't just data. It was intention, documented, timestamped, undeniable. Then came the video. Gasps spread through the courtroom like wind through dry grass. On screen, my mother, Marlis, walking into my study, the room unmistakable. She moved with ease. No disguise, no hesitation. She sat at my desk. Opened my laptop. Navigated to my inbox like she'd done it 1,000 times. She clicked on one particular email. Highlighted it. Trash. Clicked again. Permanently deleted. No pause. No flinch. Just done. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one moved. Even the judge, who had maintained a practiced neutrality, seemed caught off guard. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't need to. I already knew the expression she wore. I'd seen it for years. It was the same face she used when pretending everything was fine. The face of a woman who believed casseroles could fix betrayal and that an apology didn't need to be spoken to be understood. The verdicts came in that afternoon. Virgil, my father, guilty on 2 counts, identity misuse and financial fraud. The restitution ordered was staggering, over $1 million. The court ordered a full seizure of assets. Every house. Every vehicle. Every offshore account. Every shell company. Dismantled. He was barred from working in any financial capacity for the rest of his life. He didn't react. Just sat there with his jaw clenched, his tie slightly loosened, like the real blow was the inconvenience of being held accountable. The only time he blinked was when the judge used the word permanently. That, it seemed, pierced the armor. Marlis wasn't imprisoned. But she didn't walk away clean. Obstruction of justice. Tampering with evidence. The judge sentenced her to community service and required her to attend a court-mandated financial ethics course. But perhaps most notably, she was ordered to make a public apology. Not just to me. To everyone misled by the illusion of our family. She would have to stand in front of a podium and speak the truth she had tried to bury under garden parties and family Christmas cards. Talon didn't fall in the courtroom. But he fell all the same. A week before the trial, someone filmed him delivering groceries for Instacart. He was still wearing a blazer. No tie. Sleeves rolled. The video went viral, captioned. From tailored lies to boxed mac and cheese. The internet had its fun. Comments rolled in like a flood. Remember when he said failure was a mindset? Guess he manifested a 15% tip. Karma wears AirPods. His PR firm dropped him that afternoon. I didn't watch the clip. I didn't need to. I didn't take the stand for the sentencing. I had already spoken, and I was done explaining myself to people who had spent their entire lives trying not to hear me. Instead, I sent a letter. It was read aloud by the judge, each word carrying a weight that settled over the room like dust. I release you from the role of parent. I release myself from the role of daughter. That bond is broken, not out of hate, but of necessity. You chose lies. Des choses trousses. You built an image. I'm building a life. That difference is permanent. There was silence after she finished. Even the prosecution looked shaken. One juror wiped a tear discreetly. Another clutched her hands in her lap like she'd just heard something too close to home. When it was over, I exited through a side door, flanked by court officers. Cameras flashed. Shouts followed. Questions hurled like confetti. A man called out. "Rylena, do you feel justice was done?" I paused. Just enough. Justice was done, I said. But family? That's a wound I'm still learning how to stop reopening. That night, I returned to my hotel. The silence in the room felt earned. I stepped in front of the mirror and looked at my reflection, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. I didn't look different. But for the first time, I wasn't flinching. And that, I realized, was the real sentence. They lost everything. And I found myself. I moved in the day after the sentencing. The apartment was small, bare walls, hardwood floors, one window that looked out over a brick wall. But it was mine. No one had picked the furniture. No one's name was on the lease but mine. I didn't decorate. Not right away. I liked the emptiness. It gave me space to breathe, to let silence exist without guilt. The walls didn't demand anything from me. The fridge held only what I put in it. Every drawer opened to what I remembered placing there. For the first time in my life, I wasn't adjusting to someone else's expectations. But even peace has an echo. Some nights, I'd wake with my chest tight, half expecting to hear my father's voice booming through the house or my mother's footsteps soft but full of purpose. I'd sit up, drenched in sweat, and remember that they weren't here, that they weren't anywhere near me anymore. Other nights, I'd imagine the verdict hadn't happened. That they'd walk through my door with coffee and smiles and say, "We're sorry. We didn't know." But those were the lies I told myself to fall back asleep. Mornings were better. I'd limp slightly to the kitchen, pour coffee, open the blinds. My leg healed unevenly, and I still had a twinge in my ribs when the weather shifted. But it reminded me of everything I'd survived. I answered emails. I returned to work gradually, first part-time, then full-time. My team welcomed me back without fanfare, just quiet understanding. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. A few weeks after moving in, there was a knock at my door. Not a delivery. Not a neighbor. It was Avis. She held a small box in her arms, wrapped in an old towel. When I opened the door, she smiled like she hadn't aged a day since my 5th birthday party. "I wasn't sure if you'd want it," she said. "But I figured. Better with you than in a drawer." I let her in. We sat at the little kitchen table. She unwrapped the towel carefully, like it might break. Inside was a faded folder with crayon drawings, stick figures labeled Mom, Dad, Talon, and one small one with glasses and too many arms, me. And there was a note, folded and yellowed with time. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "You were always the light, even when they looked away." My grandmother. I didn't cry. I thanked Avis and made tea. We sat in silence for a long time, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. After she left, I pinned the drawing to the fridge with a single magnet. In the months that followed, I joined a local support group for people who had been betrayed by their families. We met every Thursday night in the back of a church, sitting in a circle on mismatched folding chairs. Some cried. Some didn't speak at all. But every story reminded me that I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. I shared my story once. Just once. See. Afterward, a man in his 60s, David, patted my shoulder and said, "You walked through fire, and you didn't come out bitter. That's the hardest part." I smiled. Not because I agreed, but because I was trying. A few weeks later, I was asked to speak on a podcast, Invisible Lines, a series on financial abuse within families. I hesitated at first. I didn't want to become the woman whose parents defrauded her. But then I remembered the woman who'd called me out of the blue, the one who lost everything because she believed in the face they used. I owed it to her. So I said yes. The episode aired, and the messages poured in. People I'd never met. Women who'd been forced to sign mortgages for brothers, men whose parents had emptied their accounts, sons and daughters who'd been made into props for someone else's success. Every message was different, but they all ended the same way. I thought it was just me. Work moved forward. I was promoted again, this time with full HR transparency and internal security checks. The new title didn't matter as much as what came next, a party. Real, simple, and mine. My team planned it without telling me. There was cake. There was a banner that said, "You earned this." There were photos of all of us, not just me, but everyone I'd built trust with again. I showed up. On time. In a dress I picked for comfort, not statement. And I smiled, not for show, but because it felt right. That evening, I walked home from the office. It was late spring, the kind of evening where the breeze carries laughter from open patios and you can smell fresh soil in someone's front garden. As I crossed the last block before my building, I saw them. A family, 2 parents and a little girl in overalls, walking ahead of me. The girl skipped between them, swinging both their hands. She laughed like the world hadn't given her a single reason to fear it yet. I slowed down. Watched. Not with envy. Not regret. Just observation. Then I kept walking. And I thought. I stopped chasing what I never had. And started building what I deserved. Sometimes, the hardest truth isn't that your family hurt you. It's that they never saw you as a person to begin with. Rylina's story reminds us that loyalty has limits, and silence can cost more than speaking up. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, ask yourself, what do you owe to people who only see your value when it benefits them? Have you ever had to walk away from your own family to protect yourself? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next story that needs to be told.